and pass around the max.
Holy madness. Okay. Gotcha.
All right, so I am recording now. You can see the little light up on top. I can, we can get started whenever you all want to, so just let me know. We got 14 participants. They're gonna roll in, so.
Oh, hi,
I will. Hi, everybody. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
If you don't mind, mute yourself. Mute yourself. I will mute you if you don't, but mute yourselves. Except our panelists, of course. All right, welcome everyone to the William Grant Still Arts Center. We're not actually in the William Grant Still Arts Center. Welcome to my home, actually. Welcome to my Grace Jones albums. I'm really excited about this panel. When we found out that we would have to close, I was really disappointed that we couldn't continue with some of the programs that we wanted to do, and then we just brainstormed as a team, and then I talked with Eric, and Eric was like, "We're doing the panel, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So we figured it out, and we're all here. And what's exciting about this platform now is that one of our participants who lives in New York City is able to join us today, and that would have not been possible had we been live. So there are upsides to everything, obviously. But my name is Ami Motavalli. I'm the director of William Grant Still Arts Center. We're trying to put on all the programs that we were doing before. We have classes, we have meetings, and we have a live DJ session. We've been doing live DJing to Willie Bobo's music every Sunday at 4 p.m. And last week we had a lot of people join and they really enjoyed it. So this week I think he's doing, it's Peter Woods, and he told me he's gonna do the first 3 albums that Willie worked on. So he's gonna focus on early years of Willie Bobo tomorrow at 4 p.m. You can tune in on Facebook or Instagram Live. We're at WGS Arts on Instagram and William Grant Still Arts Center on Facebook. So please do join us. Just turn it on and enjoy. Do whatever you like to do. But I want to start off by reading everybody's bio. So I'm going to start with Eric, because he's the person I reached out to, and he's the person that curated the show with me. Ah, lovely, there it is, beautiful background. Yes.
I did it.
Yes, you figured it out. All right, so Eric Bobo Correa is the youngest son of Willie Bobo and became a part of his father's musical career at the age of 5 until he was 15 years old. He continued to play and lead his father's band for a year after his father's passing, and then took some time off to concentrate on school and his own music. Eric forged his own path as a musician, percussionist, drummer, but also composes music. He played with the Beastie Boys from 1992 to 1996, and simultaneously played with Cypress Hill for 4.5 years, going back and forth between the 2 bands. Cypress Hill asked Eric to go on tour with them just 1 week prior to Beastie Boys. So he left the Beastie Boys to play with Cypress Hill from the early days of playing with both bands to present. His solo projects include an album, Meeting of the Minds, and he has also worked on several group projects with Ritmo Machine and Cypress Junkies, with DJ Rhetmatic of the Beat Junkies, and Bobo Meets El Guapo. That's just to say a tiny bit. That's a very short bio of what Eric has done. He is also a master percussionist, just like his father, one of the best that there is. So it has been an honor to work with him. Born in Sao Paulo, Brazil, raised in the South Bay of Los Angeles, Mario Caldato Jr. has been involved in music making and engineering since his youth. He has been in numerous bands, worked to upstart Delicious Vinyl Records, and was involved in mixing and engineering their first releases. I apologize. Mario has produced multi-platinum award-winning albums with the Beastie Boys, and in 1989, Willie Bobo's song Super Mellow was sampled in their song Shake Your Rump. He continued his work with artists internationally, including Latin Brazilian artist Seu Jorge, and actually, congratulations, the the Freddie Gibbs and Mad Lib album was extraordinary. One of my favorite albums of last year. So thank you for that work.
Right on.
Mario Caldato Jr. is known for his passion for creating just the right sound and has been asked to mix numerous albums to add the perfect touch from hip hop to jazz to rock. In 2006, he collaborated with Eric Bobo on producing some previously unreleased music by Willie Bobo in an album called Lost and Found. 10 years later, in 2016, they continued this work with the release of more songs by Willie Bobo called Dig My Feeling. And I was playing that album in the background if you were around to listen. Rob Markman is joining us from New York City. He is a hip hop journalist, extraordinary, amazing journalist. I so enjoy your work. And a rapper who's been dropping songs like every 2 songs a month for a full year, and just dropped a video yesterday. And he is also the nephew of Willie Bobo. He is currently the director of artistic relations at Genius. His work in journalism includes Complex, The Source, Vibe, and Don Diva magazines. He was senior hip hop editor at MTV Network and deputy editor at XXL magazine. He has also achieved great success as a rapper with 2 albums and numerous singles played nationally and internationally. And go on his social media because the video yesterday was extraordinary. Dr. Joshua Kuhn is an author, and he's also our moderator today. So I'm going to give it over to him after this is done. Dr. Josh Kuhn is an author and editor of many books and anthologies, and the curator of numerous art, music, and public humanities projects. His research, his research and practice focus on the arts, music, and politics of cultural connection, with an emphasis on archives, global migration, and Los Angeles. He is a recipient of the 2006 American Book Award, 2016 MacArthur Genius Fellowship, and 2018 Berlin Prize. From 2013 to 19, he led a trilogy of projects based on the special collections of the Los Angeles Public Library that resulted in a celebrated series of books, exhibitions, and public programs. His writing has appeared in the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, the New Yorker, and many more. He co-edits the book series Refiguring American Music for Duke University Press, serves on the editorial board of Public Culture, Journal of Popular Music Studies, and the Music Research Annual. And on the board of DubLab, he's on the board of DubLab and the University of California Humanities Research Institute. He co-curates CALA Crossfade Lab and directs the Popular Music Project of the Norman Lear Center at USC. Thank you all for joining us. And Josh, I'm gonna let you take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ami, and thank you everyone for joining near and far. It's great to see people. You know, we've all remarked already on the remarkable and unfortunate circumstances that have necessitated this kind of a format. And while the kind of deep urgency and uncertainty and disruption of this moment is obviously serious and severe and real, we all know it's not the first time in human history where people have been forced to stay apart and have been forced to not move and be together and have their movements controlled. And music has always been there for us as a cultural force to connect across distance. That whatever wall you put up between people, however you try to keep people apart from each other, music's always been that tool that seeps through, right? And that connects people near and far across the world. This has been the history of recorded music, as we all know, from the early days of cylinders to radio, to LPs, to MP3s. This is how we connect. And so while this is unique and singular, I think it's important to recognize that what we're talking about today, the legacy of music in particular, is something that's always been a force of connection. So it's a perfect way to get through all this and kind of reset a little bit on what brings us together and what matters. I thought what we do is I have a series of questions for the panelists, and then we can kind of have a conversation, and then we'll open it up to anybody else who has questions. And I would probably just say, those of you who have questions, if you want to put them into the chat, that's great. Or you can use the raise your hand function. There's a little hand raise that if you look right there on the participant side, that'll pop a little virtual hand up. So when we get to the Q&A section, if you want to pop a hand, if you want to just kind of pop your hand up, that also makes it really easy. I wanted to start actually by asking you, Eric, particularly about this exhibition. And this exhibition at this place, at the William Grant Still Art Center, because it struck me as someone who's loved Willie Bobo's music, you know, for a long, long time, and appreciated and written about it. I was at first, in a really superficial way, surprised is a strong word, but that it's to see Willie Bobo's career connected to an art center that is usually thought of specifically in a limited way as an African-American art center, right? To have an artist who is usually written about in a Afro-Latino or Latin American context. I wanted to get your sense about how important it was for you to see his work in the context of an African-American art center in Los Angeles.
Well, for me, it made sense because growing up, I mean, a lot of times he was performing in clubs that were very close to there, like clubs like the Parisian Room, Marla's Memory Lane, you know, other spots like that are like in the Chitlin circuit, so to speak. So he was always connected to the people there, and they gave him love, and the fact that it was always so close. I mean, he used to take me to get my hair cut there at the Wizards of Hair down there in like Adams, I think it was. So he was really connected. And what struck me with the art center is that it's really connected to the people. It really connects with the people through their programs, through the kind of events that they have there. So for me, it was kind of a perfect kind of blend, because my dad was about the people. My dad performed in front of so many people, but he was always wanting to make the people happy and feel good, especially on stage in his music. And they loved him. And while we were still doing stuff, you know, gathering material and talking with Ami, she was always telling me that, wow, she's talking to so many people and they're giving so much love to him, that, you know, from around the neighborhood. So for me, it was a no-brainer. And I think that it really worked out to have it there, and to be able to have stuff like this is great.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's also just so incredible to see his name next to William Grant Still's name, right? In this long lineage of vital, you know, Afro-diasporic composers and performers. It's just wonderful. I wanted to ask now that I'll ask everybody on the panel, but Eric, also starting with you, I want to ask everybody about their first experiences with Willie Bobo's music. And for you, I'm imagining those first experiences were as much as a listener, as we just heard, as a performer. You know, as a young kid, what was that like for you growing up playing with the person who also is your dad?
Thinking about it now, it was kind of surreal. I just, you know, wanted to play with my dad. I didn't really know any of his songs or the songs that made him famous, or, you know, just the songs that he would play, you know, and in the clubs. I was just waiting for my chance to play with him. And, you know, to spend those nights, you know, those school nights, him playing me all sorts of music and kind of training me, so to speak. It was an amazing experience because, you know, not every musician gets that opportunity to get that kind of schooling like that, you know. It was a great experience to learn that way. And he would correct me on the stage. He would do all that stuff, not to embarrass me, but just to have me be on point. And that's the kind of performer he was. So it was the best school for me. But I really didn't realize it, you know, in my very early years. It was just my love to play and my love to play with him.
Amazing. What an incredible gift to have that experience growing up. Rob, you're also family. And I was curious when Willie Bobo's music entered your own young ears.
Early when I was a kid, and I didn't realize how important it was at first. Willie Bobo was my uncle, technically my great uncle. He's my grandmother and Willie were brother and sister. So there's a bit of a generation gap. I think I was about 3 when Uncle Willie passed, but there was always a picture of him hanging on my parents' wall. Like some parents have like a picture of Jesus. Right, we had a picture of Willie Bobo next to the timbales, and my parents would play his music all the time and would tell stories I would always hear. And I don't know if they were telling me directly or when you're a kid and you just like your ear hustling, you just overhear the grown folks talking. But I would always hear stories about his gigs and how he would play, and my parents would always play his music. And so from a very early age, I remember him just being important to the family before I knew that he was important to the world, And the album behind me, the Uno Dos Tres album, I remember seeing that in the house all the time and being mesmerized just by the cover because it just looked like a real picture. Like a lot of album covers, you get these like it's a photo shoot, it's a whatever. It's like, man, this is so New York. Like you see the bodega, you see the Gola Champagne advertisement, you see the pigeons, you see him crossing the street. And I don't know why this cover always stood out to me, but it was the pictures and albums in the house, and the parents played music all the time.
Amazing. Mario, what about you? When did you first hear his music?
Well, I guess my first introduction was kind of through Santana version of Evil Ways on the radio, rocking out as a young, kid, not realizing the original version, yet. Eventually discovering it quite some years later, record digging inside like original Evil Ways. Wait a minute, I didn't realize. And then I kind of got into the whole, the Latin Boogaloo scene and started going through all the Willie Bobo stuff, and like this is the original version, and heard it and like, oh my God, it was mind blowing. And obviously classic, the Fried Neck Bones was one of the first records also that we had and actually listened to endlessly. As it was an inspiration in so many ways, just musically. Upon the first listen, you're like, where did this come from? What kind of sound is this? It's so unique and so different. Those were the first 2 songs that I really heard that just made me a fan for life. Just like I gotta get everything, and started collecting Willie Bobo stuff.
When you say that it sounded different, that there was something unique in those tracks, could you kind of play that out a little bit? Like what were the things that sounded innovative or singular for you?
Well, the I guess it's the feel of it, like there's like a tribal kind of a vibe mixed in, with it, and with the vocals, and this very kind of haunting reverb on the vocals, and like the group chanting of Fried Neck Bone. It just grabs you. I don't know, the moment when I had heard it at the time, you were like, this was just so real and just raw and unique. It was Latin, but it was kind of African, and yet it was like exotic music. It covered a lot of ground, and very unique. And it leaves you kind of mesmerized. After you hear it, you're like, I got to hear it again. You just keep wanting to hear it, and it's addicting, and I just started, digging in deeper and finding out that there's so many gems, and most of the catalog is incredible. All the records have incredible moments on it, but
it's interesting that in what you just said, that it's almost like a sonic version of what Rob was talking about, that there's that it was like a musical realness and a sonic realness that matched the album cover photographic realness.
It's very, very roots, but yet very, you know, very local, you know, like you can relate to it. And that's what's amazing. The cover, I mean, I've looked at the cover for hours listening to the records, you know, and never realized, you know, I think that's Gill, right? And in the
Yeah,
picture there, you know,
that's my brother Gill. That's right there,
had
and
no
then
idea.
that's my grandmother in the back. That's my grandmother in the back,
Oh
right in
man.
back too.
Oh, it's so amazing, and to be able to meet Eric and have everything tie together was really mind-blowing and fascinating.
In preparing for this panel, I went back and just was listening to everything I could get my hands on, from the solo records to the, you know, the sideman projects, and what I was struck with, which is not anything that anybody doesn't already know in this group, is the styles that we might use to name the various genres and sounds, right? Everything from Afro-Cuban to African to Latin jazz to disco to boogaloo to funk, R&B, Brazilian, like all over the place. And there's all of these genre tags that record companies really like to use, and have always liked to use historically. And most musicians I interview, after 5 minutes of talking about genre, don't want to talk about genre, and it's music. Or it's a language that in this case is born of the African diaspora, right? And the experience of Africans and African Americans reinterpreting music in different contexts. I'm wondering, for all of you, like, how do you think about those questions of where he fits genre-wise or style-wise? Does that even matter when you look back on the history of his music for you all?
Not at
Well,
all.
for me, no, because you know he was a chameleon. I mean, he dipped and dabbed into so many different styles you couldn't pinpoint, you know, and that's why he didn't want to be pigeonholed into a certain genre, because it wasn't about genre. It was about just music, you know, and you can find pieces of music from all over the world that you can kind of latch onto and kind of want to mix into your sound. And I think that that's what he did. You know, he had a certain sound, he had a certain groove, he had a certain thing, but he was always open to try different things and put it into his mix, and you know, and it come out with a Bobo sound, and that was his thing. That's how I knew it live. You know, he did a lot of covers. You know, he did a lot of, and we recorded a lot of covers, but they have his stamp on it. You know, it's his sound, it's his thing. No matter if it was something funky or something more Latin jazzy or whatever.
And what's that stamp for you, Eric? Is there something you could pinpoint, like that Bobo sound?
For me, it was a rhythm. You know, I'm kind of very close to the music, so it's like I know it like the back of my hand. But for me, you know, he had a certain way of playing. I could tell in the playing. You know, even as a sideman, I can tell, because he was very melodic. He played very, you know, very much like how a piano player or a horn player would play, not just banging on two drums. He gave you like different sounds on each drum. So it was like it was a piano, you know, he played that way. So it was the way that he played that stuck out to me, that even if he was in the background, even if he was a sideman, it would be like that.
Yeah, I was actually struck by that as well, just in listening kind of historically, that even tracks that he's just a band member on versus the solo track, the tracks where he's the leader, it's very rare when his playing is like put up in your face. Like, he never really like was a kind of show off percussionist in that way on the recordings, where it wouldn't lead with it. It was always like really beautifully woven in, and kind of was able to find his spot in an ensemble in a really kind of organic way.
I agree.
And the versatility of it all too. I mean, from when you just look at the list of names of people that he played with, from Tito Puente to Caldato to Carlos Santana, Mongo Santa Maria, and then his own solo stuff, right? And then when you talk about his solo work, how it transcends even that with generations where you'll get an artist from today, a hip hop artist like Joey Badass, rapping over a Willie Bobo sample. You know what I'm saying? Which is heavily driven. It wasn't altered so much that really his soul of what he intended was kept intact for even that record for a new generation. It just speaks to the versatility that he had and the way that the music that he played transcended that genre box that you were talking about.
Yeah, and it's I think it's also connected. I think, Rob, and you'll know better than I, that in a way this is also what hip hop helped do, was to kind of break down those really strict boundaries, so that when people were digging for samples, you didn't care what genre it was. What you cared about was how it sounded, or how great the break was, or how unique that a particular sound was. Is that something that you find in the connection between his music and
To him.
and
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because even for me, that helped with my discovery. Remember, I was describing that it was something that my parents played in the house, and it was something that I knew that was important to my family. And it took years for me to learn how important Willie Bobo was to the world and to musicians across the world. And part of that was through hip hop. I'm of the hip hop generation. So I remember listening. I remember I was about 14 to 15 years old when I first got my MPC, my drum machine and sampler. And so the first records I started experimenting with other records in the house. And I remember trying to sample fried neck bones and some whole fries. I sucked at making beats, so I couldn't quite get it right. But it was something in there that I'm like, man, this will really translate. And, you know, then when you see hip hop kind of sample that and take that, I mean, that's what it's all about, you know? And it makes you, a lot of times my favorite hip hop records, whether it was from Biggie or Nas, made me go back and learn about the Isley Brothers, or learn about something that came generations before me based off of the sample. But Willie Bobo was different. When I heard a Willie Bobo sample, I knew it because it was ingrained in me and just played around the house since I was a child. But yeah, man, it totally speaks to that.
And you know, if I look, Mario, at your discography, it's similar in a way in that you're working across so many different kinds of artists. What's your sense of that genre question of the categories and how we think about his music?
Well, I agree with what Eric was saying, that Willie was so versatile, and you could throw him in any situation, and he would bring his sound, which is very melodic. Like he said, you know, there's drummers for percussionists who play just a pattern and stuff like that, but he brought this personal extra taste to it, you know, with speaking with the drums, basically letting the drums speak in its tone, like a piano player or somebody else, not just a drum, but you felt that. And I think that works in any genre, and it covers everything. And that's basically what he did. You could put him in any mix, and he would make it speak, you know, his part, you know. And like you said, didn't have to be up front either. You just had it in there, and you'd be bubbling along, and you'd be like, wow, this has got a really cool vibe. Next thing you realize is some percussion things that's going on, and some little fills and stuff that are like speaking to you. And they're like, and you're tapping your foot and grooving, you like look at the record, and that's Willie Bobo on it, you know.
Yeah.
So he definitely he's just so versatile. That's really the word, like you said.
Yeah.
Brazilian. He throws in a little bit of everything in his sound, you know, which, you know, I work with all these different styles, and I could throw in probably Willie on anything, and it would definitely work, because that's what he did. You know, he was a man of the world. You know, he listened to everything. You can put him in Indian music, and it'll work. You know, anything.
Incredible. I wanted to go back to something Eric said a minute ago about the question of him as a sideman and him as a leader, putting out solo records. What's your sense, Eric, of what was there a favorite role for him? Did he prefer one over the other?
Well, for me, my life with him, he was always a leader. And I saw him like nothing but that. And I think that he felt very comfortable with that. He was comfortable in the position of directing musicians and getting them to play at their best. You know, I saw him grooming musicians, a lot of excellent musicians. I really didn't learn so much about the sideman part until a little later. You know, I was kind of backwards with it, you know, like, you know, I grew up also early days, you know, with hip hop and things like that, and before the sampling thing, and all the songs, that a lot of songs have been sampled by hip hop artists. I knew the originals. I either saw those musicians or those bands, or I heard them, or we had the records and stuff like that. So that was like normal music for me. But it was just crazy, like how he was even open to that. I remember that Rapper's Delight was out, and Rapper's Delight was like a 15-minute or so record, but like everybody like had to like know the whole rhyme. You know what I mean? There's like 3 MCs, and everybody had to know the whole rhyme. I was like learning. I was doing that in my room, and my dad like listening to me. So one day we're doing a gig, and he says, "Yo, I want you to do that thing that you were doing in the room, and you know that rapping thing, you know." So he had his band kick a beat, and I'm rapping Rapper's Delight. I'm doing the whole rhyme. So, you know, there's pictures of the exhibition that, you know, you see me that's on the mic. I wasn't singing, I was rapping. You know, so
and he never threw any little Apache bongos underneath you?
You see, that's the thing, is that it was like, it wasn't breakbeats. It was like, at that time, with hip hop, there was done with like Rapper's Delight, and you know, the Message, all out of those were done with live musicians. So yeah, it wasn't about like the breakbeat part of it, you know, yet. But I'm sure that if he would have lived long enough to hear that part of it, yeah, oh my God, the things that he would have done, I can just only imagine.
Yeah. It's when you I had in a very different way had a similar experience with his music, in that I actually only really knew the solo records with him as a leader. That's what I had associated with him. And then the more time I spent going through just how many records he played on, this goes to something Rob was referencing a second ago, and Rob mentioned some of these names, but just to add to those names, like George Shearing, Nat Adderley, Dorothy Ashby, Miles Davis, Jose Feliciano, Dexter Gordon, Chico Hamilton, Grant Green, Herbie Hancock, and that's not everybody. Like that's a who's who of, you know, mid-century, post-war modern music in the United States. There's few people who are missing from that list in terms of some of the greatest players that you could play with. So it's like, to me, he's also a reminder of how important it is when we tell the history of music, that we don't only tell the history of the solo artists or the people whose names are on the front of the records. Because if you pull the thread of the side of the session players, that's what unravels everything. And you can actually see how in demand he was and how talented he was, and that it changes the way we think about music history, because it actually connects the dots more than if we just focus on the quote unquote stars or the celebrities or the headliners.
He was probably one of the best session musicians, you know, of our time. You know, there's people that you see on their records, like, you know, that you see their name on lots of records. Yeah. And my dad was definitely one of them. And the thing is, I still get surprised to this day. I'll hear an album and I'll look, I said, oh, my dad was on this one. Okay. So it's like, it's always popping up because he played on that many records. Yeah. And like for the people that you just named, look already all the genres that you just named within those people. It wasn't just a Latin salsa thing like that. We're talking about people that was branched out. Yep. And he was able to give you that. And that's why he was in such a demand.
Yep. I'm wondering for you, Rob, like a lot of the work that we do as music journalists, but also specifically the kind of more technologically enhanced and crowdsourced work that something like, a Genius does, is helps people make those connections between names that might be lower in the credits, on a record. What's your sense of the session player celebrity, that issue and how we think about music making?
I think in this generation at least, and again, I'm of the hip hop generation. Music is so collaborative, especially now, and people aren't afraid to say it when you take, and I'm speaking in the hip hop sense, but when you take an artist like, let's say, a Kanye West, who will list, if you just whistled one note on a record, Kanye West will list you as a producer or writer or a thing, like, so, I think it's becoming tremendously important. I think this generation is really craving all the information that they can get. So if you have a favorite record, who played this, who did that on it. The flip side of it is that we're also in the danger of losing that information in the digital age. And that's one of the missions that, we have over at Genius is to provide the proper credits, because with streaming and the digital, you lose the booklets, you lose liner notes, you lose information. And with the speed things are moving, because now Spotify has it that you can look up credits, but these albums are going from the studio to the DSP so fast. Sometimes a name might be missing from the split sheet, maybe by accident, I don't know. Right? But we're not getting the information, and I think that's important, because no man is an island. Like, these records are just made very rarely with one person in the studio doing everything,
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's very important, and Willie Bobo is a testament to that.
So Mario, like when you're doing studio sessions, I'm imagining that you've got musicians who, are your go-tos, are the people you call to come in, sit in, and, play a particular thing that that they can give. What's your sense of the importance of people who can just show up and fit in and bring their talents?
Well, that's very, very important, obviously, to the music. Who you pick and who you want to bring to the project, and they obviously bring their sound and their vibe to it, and got to have someone like Willie to definitely be like a very special thing, that is gonna uplift whatever you're bringing and stuff like that. Like myself, I would call Eric all the time when I had percussion duties, without doubt, because I can guarantee I knew that he would come up with something that was always complimentary and, like, satisfying, and everybody be like, yo, whoa, they were really very pleased with the outcome. So I mean, that's what good musicians do. They bring that vibe and that sound and that stamp in whatever they do, and be able to adapt and stuff. So I mean, it is a special talent. Not everyone can do it, because you can have a good musician. There are a lot of great musicians, but in the studio sometimes they may not deliver as good as they can live. That's a whole nother talent. I think Willie had both, without a doubt. His live stuff, which unfortunately I never got to see him live, must have been incredible. I only hear amazing stories from Eric and Gill and everyone else who's seen him live. I can only imagine. But he brought that also in the studio, which is a whole different thing. That's beautiful.
Yeah, I actually was going to ask the panel that the kind of the difference between his studio work and his live work. Like I was listening to the live at the Watts Jazz Festival record, where like his live performances there are I think like sound different than the studio recordings. There's a whole other energy, obviously, to them as live recordings. But I was curious, Eric, like, did he have a favorite? I mean, some people do love the studio more. Some people love the stage more. Did he see the two contexts as being kind of separate languages that he learned to speak?
I think sonically, yes, but for me, my experience with him is that he loved the stage. He loved the performance part. I'm sure that he loved to create the music and put it all together and all that process. But that's a layering process, you know. I mean, you go back in, you overdub, wow, you know, as opposed to you just get on the stage and you play it, and as a musician, you just let it out. You know, my experience with him in studio settings were minimal. I knew him on the stage. I learned of his recordings and some of his older stuff after the fact. There were songs in the songbook, you know, because we had the books for all the musicians, and there will be songs like, you know, I've seen on the albums, but I never heard him play. So I didn't, you know, beside like Fried Neck Bones or Evil Ways or things like that, and Spanish Grease, you know, I heard him play those, but they were definitely different versions in how he played them, in, you know, in the studio. And I just saw him, like I said, it's just a live player. But for me, I think that he preferred the stage. I think that he preferred the stage. But I could be wrong, but I only saw one part of it.
Now I know in this moment of COVID-19, we're all supposed to be saying that we're all together, and that there's no differences. But I do want to play a little East Coast, West Coast for a second. Sorry, Rob. And I think
why's it got to be all like that?
I think it's really important that this is, in its own way, really interesting that this exhibit's happening in Los Angeles, right? And his recorded output and his live output, you know, I think shifted when he got to LA, and the sounds of the records are very different, at least to my ears. And I'm wondering what each of you think about the you know, his kind of the impact of the West Coast, the impact of California, the impact of LA on the way that he thought about his music.
Wow. For me, you know, there's definitely a different sound, a different thing. In what ways LA influenced him? You know, I'm sure the different pace. It was definitely a different pace than New York. You know, other than that, there was definitely a shift. I don't know exactly what it was, but
where did he live when he came out here? Where did he live when he came out to LA?
Well, we settled into the Highland Park area, but I know that, you know, first the family had moved to San Francisco, and this was in the 60s. Mm-hmm. You know, my brother will let you know if I'm saying anything wrong. But that was the first time coming out to the West Coast to get that little flavor. But I think that in the midst of the 60s and the top of the 70s and the way that things were, you know, it was a different pace in LA. And I think that he just adapted to that, and the musicians were different, you know. I was just recently looking at like a Miles Davis documentary, and I think that shift that he did was kind of similar to what my dad did. You know, I mean, he heard and he saw all this different stuff, because back then, New York, there was salsa hard. 70s, it was salsa hard, dominating, Fania, dominating, you know. And my dad kind of like wanted to break from that. So he was hearing all this other stuff. And I think that really affected how he presented his music. And, you know, you weren't going to hear that same Willie Bobo from that point.
Yeah. I mean, he wasn't going to do the Kojak theme from New York. You got to do that
from
LA. You got to do that from LA.
Yeah. Exactly.
But the opportunities, right, and the gigs definitely become different. You know what I'm saying? And it opens him up. I mean, even his work on I don't know, we should be talking about Bill Cosby right now, but even, you know, with the variety show that he had, it just kind of opens you up to bigger lights You know what I'm saying? Just the way I imagine it. And you know, it was funny because even, I mean, Eric knows this. My cousin, you know, we didn't meet until or really connect until later because, you know, it was always family that we heard about, but that was our family that lived in California. So we never quite saw them. But that's why I always love this album cover that's behind me because it was so New York. It just reminded me of home. So, you know, it always felt connected to New York in a way, at least from my perspective. It always felt connected to New York. But in LA, it just seemed like bigger and endless possibilities. And,
Yeah, I mean, even if you look at like the career of, you know, of William Grant Still himself, who is usually really only talked about within the world of classical music and of opera, and yet when he came to LA, started doing a ton of stuff for Hollywood as well, right? Working for TV, working for film, and so there's that aspect, and then there's the Locke High School aspect, the long history of Black music in Los Angeles and of experimental and avant-garde jazz in Los Angeles that I think he, from what I can tell historically, he was kind of adjacent to, and that, and like that Watts record, I think is a good sign of that. What about you, Mario? What's your sense of the kind of LA period?
Well, I love all of the different genres. You know, the beginning parts of the early Tico records. I think, like Eric says, he's mainly a live. You know, like he started off as a live performer. You know, playing in the '50s with Mongo and Tito and I think Chamaposa. I think all the old school guys. So they had to bring it live, and then they figured out how to just take that to the studio. And those early records are pretty live. I don't think there's any much overdubbing at all. So those are kind of like what like the big band that they had at the era sounded like, but you know, in the studio with like, you know, the right sound and a little bit of reverbs and stuff like that. But it was a natural sound, and I can imagine in those days hearing those songs probably live sounded the same as the records or similar. And then when he went over to Verve, and then they started recording like a lot at Rudy Van Gelder, which is one of my idols of engineering, and he's a genius of sound. He captured their sound and brought this other element, these extra production things, and help bring out a more defined sound that was a little bit different than what the studio. They were still playing live. I don't think there was a lot of overdubs on the Verve records either, but there was a little bit more mystery in the sound and dimension, and really started, you know, bringing in like some very interesting production things that brought extra dimension to the sound, which is one of my favorite eras of the mid 60s, you know, from 64 to 68, 69. There's a beautiful, you know, a lot of beautiful stuff, especially in the jazz, Latin jazz and everything in that era. And Rudy actually recorded and captured a lot of these records. Even the side projects that Bobo played on were recorded there. And that's really a beautiful time. And then I guess probably 67, 68, he started coming out doing more the Jader stuff on the West Coast. And actually a lot of those records are also very live because some of them were actually recorded live with you know, different instrumentation and a different vibe, a mellower vibe, you know, with actually literally vibes. He started branching out with other jazz musicians. Gabor Zabor was on a lot of stuff, you know, which I'm a big fan of, and he played on some of his records, and the sound definitely had a cooler vibe, a different, you know, West Coast, I guess, something different in the air and in the water that really transcended in the music. A cooler, a calmer, less big band, but more smaller ensembles and more experimentation. And those records are really cool. The late '60s, and then approaching the '70s, you know, they're bringing more funkier elements in. The Bojan, the Watts Sussex record is a really kind of a turning point to more funkier stuff, you know, and just like a tighter, more harder hitting sound, you know, which is a really classic record. I really love. And then slowly altering it to more production, and then more overdubbing, and kind of like a bigger, moving from the 4 tracks and the 8 tracks to the 16 and the 24 tracks, and enabling the sound to, be competitive more in a more popular market, which, he still brought the vibe, and they still created beautiful stuff. But my favorite stuff being more the 60s, the mid 60s, the early 60s.
Yeah, the live stuff is, I mean, for me as a player, when you're recording, it's great when you can record with the band like together and getting that energy and still feeding off of each other. And that was the beauty for some of those records. You get an album like Puente en Percussion, and it's Mongo Santander, Tio Puente, my dad, and bass player. And
Did you say Al McKibben on bass? No.
It might have been Al McKibben. I'm not sure, but
he played on the Jader stuff. I think he played.
Yeah, he played more on the Jader stuff, but
it might be Bobby Rodriguez.
Probably. Thank you, G. Yeah, Bobby Rodriguez. So, but it was them, some rum, some weed, and go, and just jam. And there was magic there. There was magic, and it's great too, to record, and you do the overdubs and everything. You're chilling in the studio and everything like that. But it's really a stop and go kind of vibe, because you do the take, you hear back, you try to do another one. It's not a continuous thing. So yeah, you can adapt to that. But my dad was a player. He was a musician. So you get to him live, he's going to bring it like top notch.
One of the records he did on the West Coast, of course, was the Drum Session album. And that's, there it is right there. And that's, of course, one of the more famous albums in terms of his history of being sampled. And I wanted to talk about that. I know we've hinted at it a little bit, but I wanted to get a sense, especially Mario and Rob, from your point of view, based on both of your work with Bobo's music from the perspective of how he's been sampled. Maybe Mario, we could start with you, just historically, like to take us to that moment when his music literally started entering those records and kind of came into the studio that way for you.
Well, this was definitely the first record that I knew that Willie played on, because it actually says it right on the cover. So the Dust Brothers were actually responsible for bringing that in. The Dust Brothers, Easy Mike and King Gizmo. They were 2 college kids from Claremont, DJs, were radio DJs, and they had a radio show, and they played hip hop, and they were into Public Enemy, and they really listened to the samples and really dissected it and studied, and they figured out how you can sync up more than 1 or 2 things playing. If you had a drum machine, you can only sample 10 seconds at that time. So they figured out how to do that, but then they also can sync it back and add another 10 and another 10. And so you can layer stuff, and started really breaking stuff down and have multiple things playing. And one of their early demos that they had was these tunes that had this samples with the the drum session sample here that was used for Shake Your Rump. And at the time, I didn't know who it was until Easy Mike brought in the records. He'd always have it in his crate, and because there was tons of good stuff on there, and just ready to sample. And then just it was like 4 drummers playing, and then whenever the timbales come in, you would imagine for sure that it got to be Willie, and of course it's fire. When you put it on, and they're like, dude, it's like a centerpiece in the song. When those rolls come in and stuff like that, it's just like, doesn't get any better. They would pick that 2-3 seconds of that perfect bar and knew when to lace it in, and they made these beautiful compositions. They were actually instrumentals at first, and then they had their homeboys rap on them, and then they showed us this, and I was working with a producer, Matt Dyke, who, rest in peace, passed away last year, but was the DJ who came up with Delicious Vinyl, and his partner Mike Ross to make a label and start producing stuff. And we worked on the Tone Loc and Young MC together, and we happened to meet the Dust Brothers and brought them in on some production. When we heard what they were doing, we're like, how do you get 20 things playing? They're like, oh, we know how to lace empty and use time code and sync stuff up and layer, and we're like, wait a minute, we need this technology. And then they showed us these demos, and we're like, they had 20 things playing at the same time, and we had to get in with them, and we hired them. They basically hired them to produce some tracks, to kind of learn their secrets, and they shared it. They taught us the techniques of laying SMPTE and syncing up the drum machines with these little boxes, and they started bringing their libraries and their tapes, their records, and sharing stuff. And we were just like, Matt had the genius idea of like wanting to, we should send this to the Beastie Boys, because they were looking for a new, I think a new music or something like that. They had issues with their label and their producer at the time. There was some struggles and stuff. And he happened to be at a party DJing in Beverly Hills, and I believe Ad Rock was there, and he played the tape Car Thief and Shake Your Rump, the two songs that they were instrumentals at the time. And I think Ad Rock was like, where's this music coming from? Who's playing this? And then you went and talked to Matt, and he was like, oh yeah, we have these songs, and like made the connection. And it was sold, that he bought the idea. He immediately called Mike and MCA and said, you guys got to come out here and hear this stuff. And I think a couple of days later, they showed up at the studio. So thanks to
awesome story.
The record,
Yep.
But the samples, it's just like fire.
Now, that's crazy, because that album, I remember always, I was always listening to the records, putting them on the turntable, and that was one of the records. And I know that song and everything, and the break and everything, but it never hit me when I heard Shake Your Rump by the Beastie Boys, which is one of my favorite Beastie Boy tracks. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't until I was performing with them, I was on tour with them, and I heard it, and I'm like, wait a minute, that drum break is my dad. I didn't know. I had no clue. I was oblivious to it. So that was like, and because to be honest with you, I didn't know that, hip hop, producers or anybody knew of my dad. I had no clue. I thought it was just like separate, and to tell you the truth, it wasn't until one year I was on tour, Smoking Goose tour in the mid-90s. And we were on tour, and this Tribe Called Quest was on the tour. And they had just got off the stage, and I'm walking with them, and I see Q-Tip, and Q-Tip goes up to me, and he says, yo, Bobo, your dad's album, Do What You Want to Do, is one of my favorite records. And then he split off and go into the dressing room. And I'm like saying, Q-Tips knows my dad's albums. And then I started to listen. But then it was like, okay, this is, now they're really checking for it. And then the kick the Willie Bobo. What is, I remember when I first started hearing it, I hit up Rob. I hit up Rob. I said, yo, Rob, man, what is this? What does this mean? I'm hearing this kick the Willie Bobo. What does, because it wasn't West Coast lingo.
It was
that
an
was
East Coast thing.
Coast.
Yeah,
That
it
was
was
on
East Coast.
So I'm like, kick the Willie Bobo. Are they dissing or what? What's going on? So he broke it down to what it meant, and then I'm like, then it starts to pop up in songs and things like this, and I'm like, wait a minute, okay. People have been saying in their songs, kick the Willie Bobo and all this stuff, and this was going on for a while, and then it was like just a crazy connection because I remember him hearing the Rapper's Delight thing, and he would have definitely been into the hip hop thing and what they were doing because it was something new. But he would have definitely tried to find his way into how to play on it. And I think that that's kind of like where I came in.
Hey, can I connect the dots here? Can I connect?
Yeah, please.
There you go.
That
That's
Gill,
my bro.
Gill wants to add, and Taylor also. Well, I guess Taylor, you've got the hand up for both of you.
Hey, Mario, if I'm not mistaken, it's because of you that Eric got hooked up with the Beasties because of the wedding. If I'm not mistaken, who got married and he needed a jazz band, and my dad had died, and Eric was still with the jazz band, and you said, I think I know who can turn around and do it, and we went up to what, Beverly Hills, up somewhere up in the forest somewhere, and they had the.
Well, no,
Matt Robinson. That was Matt Robinson.
Yes.
He was the connecting. I worked for Matt Robinson.
Okay.
At the club, Funky Reggae. So
okay.
we were partying always, and he knew Eric.
Yes.
And Matt Robinson, who's a brother of Holly Robinson P.
Exactly.
21 Jump Street, right? I was doing stuff over there at his club. And, he was like a big promoter back in the day. He had Funky Reggae going on. He had things going on. That was like the spot.
Oh, yeah.
So I was in one of his other rooms, little jazz, like the cool chill room. All right. So Matt Robinson is the one who called me and he says, yo, Ad Rock is, interested in you doing a wedding. And, but the thing is that Mario had seen the Playboy Jazz Festival. You were there at the Playboy Jazz Festival, so you had seen me play.
Yeah. Okay.
This was beforehand, so it's crazy how the dots
connected.
Just really connected and everything like that.
Yes. And also that album cover, Rob, is so famous because back in those days, that's across the street from where grandma and my father was raised, and your grandmother at the end of 110th and, Central Park, that's exactly where that was. But those days, that band had a grind for a good 4 years straight at Count Basie's club. Okay, back in those days, gentlemen, guys played 5 sets. They didn't get off the stage until like 3, 4 in the morning. They played 7 days a week. There was no time to get off. And Pop's band was at Count Basie's, which was not too far from Small's Paradise in Harlem. And they were grinding for 3, 4 years straight. That's why you got that Willie Bobo sound from Fried Neck Bones, Spanish Grease, and all that came from that hard work. Okay, so just wanted to throw that in there because when he was a studio man, he put in a lot of hard work being a studio man, and he was a studio man and a side man at the same time. Daytime, he'd be in the studios while I was in school. Nighttime, this was before Eric's time. Nighttime, he'd be playing with Herbie Mann, Dave Pike, whoever it was until he got his own band. And still when he got his own band before Spanish Grease time, talking about Bobo's Beat Time, the first couple of albums, Wahida, that was at the developmental stage. That was still a hard grind.
Yeah.
And
Correa.
Mario made a statement. He said when we came out here, the music got a little bigger because the budget got bigger. The budget got bigger, so he was able to experiment. But that was kind of hard because they expected a certain thing from him, okay? Because if you wanted your percussion section, your rhythm section on your tune to be hot, you had to call him, okay? So when he wanted to do his own band and do his own music, it was like, well, we want to tone you down a little bit. And he refused to be toned down. And the rest is history.
I think something you said, among the things you said that are all great, Gill, but that I want to emphasize is that question of work and the question of labor. And this is also something that particularly with session players and sidemen, and I've interviewed a lot of them, and they all tell similar stories where during the day, there would be not just one session, that they would be going to 5 different recording sessions during one day.
Exactly.
And then going home, having dinner with the family, and then going and playing out 1 or 2 gigs at the same night. And that's the sense of the work and the labor of the musician is something that I felt even without knowing him personally, but in looking at just the sheer amount of sessions he played on, that I just want to emphasize what clearly is a work ethic that was pretty extraordinary.
It was sacrificing because, put it this way, I never seen my dad rehearse. I didn't know that my dad was played music as a profession, and probably until Evil Ways. Okay, I started seeing him, but home, he would be home, sleeping, eating, going to a gig. And then I became a band boy and started seeing the instrumentation, the music business, and Eric was the showstopper. He was a 5-year-old little cutie pie that knew how to rap and had rhythm. And we would turn around and bring him, and I had to comb his hair, do his little thing, get him all cute, and he'd go out there and kill the show from day one, you know? So it then became a working process, and then Pops put in the time to school Eric to be what he is today.
Eric, I have to say, now that I've heard that story, I'm a little disappointed that your artist name is not Cutie Pie.
I think we were talking about it, but you know, I said no. Let me get you back to you on that one.
He's still the showstopper, though.
You know, for me, like I grew up playing and got a chance to play at a lot of these jazz clubs in Los Angeles with my dad. And I understood the thing that at that time it was like on Thursdays and Wednesdays and Thursdays, you probably have 2 shows a night. Fridays, Saturdays is 3 shows. And then Sunday you go back to 2 shows. And I had a different outfit for every show in one night, because that's how my dad would do it. We'd have our clothes thing and have a whole setup, what we were going to wear for each show. We'd bring that. You know, my bro would help set up my stuff and break down the stuff and make sure that we got paid and everything like that when I started to take over stuff. But we try to maintain the same work ethic as far as that, you know, to make sure that, you know, we were on time, make sure the show went on time, and that the musicians were tight, the band was tight. You know, we couldn't accept anything less.
That's right.
You know, because it was the Bobo legacy that had to be done. You know, it was one thing when I was playing with my dad and to get, you know, those little accolades of like, oh my God, you know, he's so cute, you know, he could play and everything like this. But when he passed, that wasn't there anymore. It was like, okay, now, you know, I had to really prove myself because I didn't have that shield. You know, the only thing we had is that we had to work ethic of what we had to do.
Mm-hmm.
So if we was playing, we did 3 shows a night, we did it and we killed it, we rocked it, you know. And there were times that I had to, you know, you had to let my school know, okay, well, Friday night he's going to come in a little late because he's working and he's doing this, you know, and they understood. Not that they had to understood, but it was going to happen anyway. But it was that. So my dad, I saw him rehearse a bunch of it at the house and everything like that. But I saw how he had his band tight, and tight, like James Brown type.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So work. It was hard work all the way because he didn't take it lightly. He didn't take it like, oh, now I'm Willie Bobo, I don't have to do all this stuff, you know, because when he performed, he gave you his best.
Yeah, and so like part of that work question, and also to point out the obvious, we're a panel of all guys here, but I'm wondering about the work and the role of his wife in honoring Willie's legacy. Could you talk a little bit about his partner in this and your greater family's role? All the women in his life.
Wow. Well, this should be a 2-parter because my bro, growing up with my dad was really establishing his name and really having to work and be out there and not really be home as much. And my mom really having to hold down the fort and make sure that things were together. And even business-wise, I saw that as well. My mom kind of, making sure that the books were correct and everything like that, and make sure that he ate right, make sure that his clothes were all together and everything like that. It wasn't just a one-man show. I never saw it to be a one-man show. Even, when my dad was established, he couldn't have accomplished the things that he did without my mom and my mom being there in that support. I truly don't believe that he could have done that. The talent is one thing, but it's how you shape that, how you what you do with that, how you present that, and my mom made sure that at least the presentation was together because she knew that he can play, but she had to make sure that things were together.
Thank you for that.
Yes.
Go ahead, Gill.
Yes, she was a very, very strong. That was the rock of the family. What I mean by that is she sacrificed herself by enabling my dad to be able to do what he was born to do, which is be out there to perform. Okay, she held down the fort. Both my parents were working. I was a latchkey kid. In those days, it was fashionable. Come from school, you go in, and mom, you call up, you call up and say, "Mom, I'm here at home. Okay, I'm gonna do my homework." Okay, that was the situation. Dad was always on the road, always playing, so he was always on the phone checking in. Oh, the mail was always there. The check was always in the mail. So it was this for that. It wasn't until basically 1967, 68, when my mom was pregnant of Eric that she physically stopped working and became a stay-at-home mom. And so up until all those times, and we're 15 years apart, the grind was real. The grind was daily. The grind was a two-person job. And then when Eric was born, the grind became a two-person job in a different manner. Financially, it was a one-person job, but money's not everything. The bass, the rock still had to hold down the fort. And then it became how can I say, the beginnings of what we have now, what we have here. If it wasn't for that time being put in, we wouldn't have this, because Eric was gifted with that gift, that he was able to see music. My dad was around. Music was always in the house. You wake up in the morning, you hear something, you always hear every Sunday, there's Spanish music in our house. Until today.
To this day.
Sunday. You understand what I'm talking about? Yes, that salsa is going on, all this stuff. Every Sunday. Some things never die. But she also a woman, she had a profession. She was one of those women that in the 60s were in the automation, kind of like the movie Hidden Pictures, in the space. She was into automation back in those days. So, she, had a profession, had a very, very good job, but also had the love of being a family woman and a mom and a wife and the whole 9 yards. And, being that rock that she is, here we are. So thank God she's here still today. 86 years strong. Amazing. And every Sunday, salsa music, baby.
It's a must. It's a must. Don't touch the radio. Don't touch it. Don't touch it. You already know. In any Latin household, when the matriarch has the music on, you do not touch that radio. You don't do it.
I'm just going to float the idea that maybe, in this time of quarantine, she could do an Instagram Live every Sunday and the whole world could be part of the Sunday.
The world may not be ready for that. The world may not be ready for that.
No.
Yeah, that looked like that.
We'll keep it low.
I do want to turn around and say, Rob had that nice list of musicians that my dad played with. And that's not even in the 60s. In the 60s, before the Funk Brothers, in the 60s, I gotta let everybody know. Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs, Willie Bully, Jay and the Americans, come a little bit closer. All the rock and roll people, they were part of that thing. They didn't give you no credit either. Okay. Wow. And Donovan, son. And if you notice, some of those cover tunes, as you guys call it, that my dad did, a lot of those he was on.
Oh, really? Like he was covering his own recordings.
You understand?
Performances. Yeah.
Like, Come a Little Bit Closer by Jay and the Americans. He was on that. He recorded it. He did Willie Bully, I think, or Sam the Sham. My dad would turn around and steal a little bit, do his version. But he was on the original recordings in the beginning.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I'm keeping my eye on. Oh, sorry, Eric. Go ahead.
No. I was gonna say it's like news. You know what I mean? It's like there's still so many records that my dad has played on that you wouldn't think would have like a percussion, and that that's the thing. And for me, being able to play different genres of music and play on different types of records, that's what it's about.
Yep.
If you were just a Latin salsa musician that just played mambo music, and there's no disrespect to those musicians, but if you just do that, no one outside of that is really going to be checking for you, because they're going to think, well, he does that thing, unless they're open to it. So it's almost like you have to be outside your box and know what you can bring back inside the box. And my dad did that perfectly. So he was able to do rock and roll records and soul records and Latin records and everything like that. That's the beauty of his genius.
Yeah, and that's again, I mean, that's really well put. It's like, if you tell the history of music through Donovan, Miles Davis, and Tito Puente, right, you're going to get these separate lanes. But if you tell the history through someone like a Willie Bobo, they're not in separate lanes. They're all in the same lane, and he's the connecting thread. And so that's why I love when you look at credits, back to something Rob was saying, is you actually get a much more robust and dynamic view of how people collaborate than if you just focus on the headliner. It's a totally different version of history. So I'm keeping my eye on the clock. I wanted to ask one last question before we open it up to just any comments or questions that anybody still on the call has. And I would love it. I know this is a little high pressure and probably impossible to answer, But for the panelists, if there's one session, and it could be a song or a record, that for you is your favorite piece of Willie Bobo musical history, what would it be? Maybe Mario, can I put you on the spot?
One song.
Song, or I know song is hard. So if not song, album.
Well, I guess geez, that's a tough one. I'm really, I've been enjoying listening to the early records, the Tico's one, quite a bit. And I don't know which one I was going to say is my favorite one, but they have like something to them that is just so natural and so pleasing. I believe Chick Correa is on on keyboards, right, Eric? Or
yeah.
got him on in his early days on keys.
You're going to like one, yeah.
Let me see.
And plus he was on Bobo's beat.
Yeah. Say, I guess, yeah, do that. Do that thing, the Guajira. That I think that's the one I'm listening to, and have a special spot in my heart. Diferente.
See, that's
Chica
for me. For me, that's my jam. The song Diferente from that, which was written by Chick Corea.
Mm.
And it's basically with the chorus is like, Bobo is different.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter, nothing, Bobo is he's saying that in Spanish.
Yep.
Bobo diferente.
Uh-huh.
No importa la gente. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And
there it is.
Dad right there, it just that's what my dad was.
Yeah.
He was one of the kind.
Diferente.
He was one of a kind.
That says it all, yeah. So I would pick that as cool. One of my special. All of them are special, but that one. I also being I think the first one, right?
Yeah.
Rob, what about you?
For me, just being young and learning about Willie Bobo's discography almost after the fact, for me it was always Fried Neck Bones. Just stood out. As a kid, I had never heard anything like it. It's a record that it just stuck with me. I feel like it's been there my whole life. And the album behind me, Uno Dos Tres album, like really instrumental for me for personal reasons. It's like learning who Willie was in the house as a family member, and then going outside and learning the reverence that other musicians had for him. It kind of made me want to get into music. Like it made me realize like it was possible. It was like, oh wow, even though I didn't have a personal relationship with Uncle Willie, with this relationship that wow, somebody in my family, and then of course Eric, and doing everything that he does, can be this great and be this revered. Wow, like it's really possible. I want to work in music somehow, and this started with journalism. But for me, it started with that record, Fried Neck Bones.
Awesome, thank you. And Eric, I can only imagine this might be impossible to answer, but is there anything that like makes you feel instantly connected to him when you hear a song? Is there one tune?
It's not really a song. It's just an everyday thing. Everything that I do, there's a connection. I feel a connection like when I play. I feel a connection when I'm writing music. I feel a connection just sometimes when I'm like listening to songs of his or stuff that he's played on, and still trying to analyze like how he's playing it, like wishing like kind of in my mind, like saying like, hey, if he could break down what he did or what he was thinking, and that I'm still in his school. You know what I mean? Like when I can go and I can listen to records he's played on or his own records and hear something new or hear something different, that's school. Because he told me that. He told me one night, he said, look at all these records. This is your school right here. That's your school. So for me, I'm still in school. I'm in, but I'm still learning. So it's not just one song. It's not just one thing. It's a whole collection.
That's amazing. Amazing. So I want to thank all the panelists. I also want to just say that I now officially want to be like an adopted member of the Correa family. Like, you guys are all wonderful, and I want to open it up to anyone on the call who might have a question or a comment, and to join the conversation. So let's see, Warren, if you want to unmute Warren, you could ask this one, or I can read it, whatever you want, but maybe having you ask it would be great.
Yeah, thanks. I'm a big fan of Willie's playing and his music, and have been blessed to play some of these songs on gigs throughout my career. So I just wanted to put this question out to you all who are experts. What are some recordings that I could go to that are good examples of Willie's melodic approach to the drums, where I can really dig in and listen to his playing?
Okay. Well, are you a drummer, percussionist? What's your?
I play drum set and percussion.
Okay.
Timbales, bongo, congas.
All right. Inventions and Dimensions. That's Herbie Hancock album, but my dad is on there, and that was actually my dad's first record being featured on drums. That he plays drums and percussion on that record, and you can hear how melodic he is, even in playing the drums and the beats that he's playing, and the way that he solos and everything like that. That's a good record. And another one would be Puente en Percussion, which to me is the Bible of any percussionist, a drummer, or a rhythm man should listen to that record, because that's it. It's the Bible right there. So those two records, start off with those, and call me in the morning.
Also, check out Lisa, the beautiful track I really love. One of my favorites.
Oh, that's on A New Dimension. I have a crazy story about that. That's real quick. Like Enrique Soto used to be on K-Jazz, KKGO on 105.1, and he was always playing this song. And I would call up. I was a little young chap. My dad had just passed, and he kept on playing the song. I said, "Man, what is that song that you're playing? What's that song?" I never heard him say the name. He says, "You don't know that song?" He says, "Its name of it is Lisa, and it's by your dad." I mean, I felt like the Jeopardy theme, I felt like that, because, like, oh my God, from that day on, that's when I studied my dad's back catalog, because of that song.
And I would also suggest, and this is going to be a weird one, and it's a kind of an outlier in a lot of ways, but if you go back to the George Shearing record that he played on, now I'm blanking on the title, but really early kind of symphonic, big band, very overly smooth. My guess is he probably didn't even like some of those sessions, but like the Cuban Fantasy, the way that he does his fills there, it's just so gorgeous and so beautiful. It's of another era and another way of playing.
There you go.
Other questions or comments? Okay, fine, Taylor, go ahead.
Can we talk about his Playboy Jazz show when he did it at the Hollywood Bowl? I know that's one that you see, like, if you go to like the Hollywood Bowl or you see video clip, it's like you see it's in the most prominent like time. Can we talk about like when he got up on the stage and like how it was and like the whole thing? Yes, to my uncle.
Wow. Well, okay. Well, the first Playboy Jazz Festival that happened in '79. and there was a big parade. That was the only time that there was a parade and stuff like that, Playboy parade. And the Hollywood Bowl is just a prestigious place anyway. For him, to be honest, it wasn't that he was like overly excited because it was the bowl. He was there to play and to wreck shop. You know what I mean? I think when '82, when I played with him, it was more for me a shock because it was like, oh my God, all these people. It's like, you know, Playboy Jazz Festival, Hugh Hefner, you know, all this kind of stuff. And he just, it was another day in the park for him, you know. If he had the emotion or something like that for a place, he didn't show it. If anything, that he was happy that, you know, we were playing it together, if anything. You know, I think you see that in the little clip when we're playing at the Playboy Jazz Festival. But it was a big thing. Playboy Jazz Festival is huge. It was a huge deal. And if you played there, you were a huge deal. And if you played there back to back, and some people did, like sometimes my father did, you were a big deal. So
that was your first one. That was your first one.
That was my first one.
Yes. And Pop's third in a row.
Yes.
Yes.
3 years back to back?
Yeah,
he did 3 years back to back.
So you were the one that made it different for the third year when you rocked the house. Just let me know.
Would be yeah.
I know. I had to say all that.
You were there.
I was there.
But you want to know something about that? He only had one set of timbales. He didn't have another set of timbales. So there was another percussionist there that had a set of timbales. So he asked if I could use them, you know, and he said, yeah, I forget who it was. But then I started to unhook this stuff. And my dad said, no, those are not your timbales. You're going to have to play those the way that they are. But it was set up different. Like I play timbales left-handed, and I play conga drums and stuff right-handed. It's weird flex. But these were different. So I'm like thinking I have to automatically start to think different on the spot. So he didn't give me no slack. He said the gig starts, you know, here it is, here are the timbales, you play them as they are. So when you see that clip of that, I'm playing somebody else's timbales that were the other way around. Everything was turned around.
Does anyone have a copy of that, or like the set, or like does anyone have any like physical hard copy memory of his Playboy, like either any of them? Or is that one of those things where,
you know what, that year was the first time that they recorded it and put it on tape, and they had it on VHS and Beta. For those who know about and remember Beta. So that was the first year. So they only got that one song. I mean, they recorded the whole thing, but they only released like a song per artist. So they, you know, that was the only footage that was ever released from that particular show.
It might be worth looking into, unless you haven't already, the Hollywood Bowl Museum has a really good archive. And they've got even ephemera going back to the very first performances. They might have other recordings that are just like board recordings that might just be sitting there that might be worth looking into if you haven't already.
Los Angeles Phil has said that they have it. The Los Angeles Phil, I believe, has
exactly
the archive.
Yeah. They run the museum and archive. Yeah.
Well, if my job opens up anytime soon,
there it is.
We'll see, because I work at the bowl. So.
Oh, perfect. You got to find out.
Yeah, my going back to like stuff like that. My dad was a good teacher. There's another time, like, you know, my dad told me, you know, you're a percussionist, you know, you need to start having your own stick bag and your own sticks and stop using my sticks, you know. Okay. So I have my own stick bag and everything like this. But then there was one show that I forgot my stick bag at home. And I would go with him, you know, but I didn't say anything until like when we just was getting there. So I told him, I said, I don't have my stick bag. Can I use a couple of sticks? And he said, yeah, no problem. But he kind of like clowned me on the stage because he said, yeah, I'm gonna bring up my son Eric. You know, he always used to joke and do jokes on stage, and basically joked and said, well, he's trying to, he wants to be a percussion, stuff like that, but he left his stick bag at home, so he had to ask me again. He kind of clowned me on stage, and I've never forgotten my stick bag because I just remember. I mean, he made a joke about it, and everybody was laughing, and it was cute. But he was jabbing me like, "Don't forget your stick bag, because if you forget it, you asked out."
I feel like that's kind of a metaphor for life, though, right?
Yeah. I mean, he
don't forget it.
I think just be focused. If you're gonna do your job, you be focused.
Yep.
You're there to be a job. You're there to do a job. People are paying to see you. They're not paying to see you mess up. They're paying to see you perform at your A game. Yep. So you got to think of it that way. And he took that very, very seriously. If a musician wasn't playing up to par in his band, he didn't hesitate in letting them go, and he would have a replacement like that.
Mm-hmm. True story. I'm going to add this in there. True story. Philip Bailey of Earth, Wind and Fire been fired from one band in his whole career, and that's by Willie Bobo. Fired him because he was a conga drummer.
No.
That's why he turned to be a singer. That's why he got into singing, because he couldn't play the conga. He got fired at Chelly's Manhole in Hollywood. True story. Ask him.
He still tries to play now. He plays now on Earth.
You said the key word. Try. But he's
still there. Come on, he does.
I love his voice, but come on now. But true story, he got fired.
This is being recorded, Gill. It's being recorded.
Wow.
Well, let the truth be told. I mean, the truth be told. I guess I wasn't.
It's funny
there.
because he told me that story. So I'm not spreading nothing. He said it real proudly. But also, my dad got a compliment by Herbie Hancock for that Inner Dimension album that Eric was mentioning. And he says, your dad is the only drummer that was able to turn around and give me what I wanted from the drums. Because he can make the timbales sound like he can make the timbales sound like drums and make the drums sound like drums. So, that was like a heartbreaker for me, coming from Herbie Hancock.
So I just want to thank everybody, and maybe as a final question, Ami, this is to you, is for anybody who's watching the recording or who's still on, in terms of the exhibition itself, are there ways for people to interact with it at this point?
Yes. Well, I'm going to be talking with the family soon, and hoping that they will extend the exhibition with us, because we don't go back until I believe mid-May. And if they agree to extend it, I would love to extend it. I would love it to be permanent, but it can't be permanent. But also, I'm working with Eric, and Eric has been generous enough to offer, and he's working on some kind of video on the way that we actually installed the exhibition. I remember working on this exhibition with you all, and sitting with Alicia in the house and talking with Gill. Willie's presence was really, really there. You could see the meticulousness, the way that he was such a hard worker. It's all over the family, every single member of the family, grandchildren, everybody, right? So in curating the exhibition, I was really hoping that the family's happy with it. I think that they are, and we wanted to live on. I personally have a kind of a fantasy that Josh and Rob work together on a book on Willie, but with the family. But that's just my personal fantasy. But
East Coast,
anyway.
West Coast, Rob, let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do the seed. They do the seed in the ground right there.
I know.
I agree.
I owe Eric, man. I owe you
Eric
because
and Gill, they are historians.
Yeah.
They are historians. They have, I mean, they can spit everything. So
My
that
dad loves
sitting
his
with them,
history.
yeah, sitting with them is wow. It's like literally a privilege. So
I'm gonna
I hope
let you
the
come in.
two of you will.
You were beautiful during this whole process. You know,
Thank
we
you.
opened up
Thank
our
you.
doors. Our doors are open to you all the time.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah. You
Thank
definitely.
you.
I mean,
It happens.
to kind of just add to this, never would I have thought that, you know, pictures that were just in our little photo book would ever be considered for any kind of exhibition. And when this was approached to me through Ami, it was like, wow, this is a different way to really show the man and his genius and really what he was about. You know, a lot of people, you know, they look to only if maybe a few people that are iconic in the Latin music, but there were definitely many more. And I think it's definitely time for my dad to take his proper place in the scheme of Latin music, because he helped pave the way for a lot of musicians to be where they're at today. I mean, Correa was in my father's band at 17 years old. And you know, Correa has won numerous amount of Grammy Awards. He's world renowned, but his start where he went through the Bobo School. A lot of people went through the Bobo School. And I think that this exhibition really, like, wow, he really was something special. So we're here to keep it going.
I believe there's one person that has a question that just sent me a message, and I'm going to try and unmute them so that they can. Oh, they did unmute themselves. Okay, go ahead.
Hey everybody! Excellent, excellent panel. Thank you all.
Thank you
for this history lesson. I know what you're talking about. Saturdays, Sundays, every morning. My mom, music. We're from Colombia, and top percussion, the Tito Puente album with Mongo and Willie Bobo, and an amazing album. That was one of the ones that really, you know, when you say albums changed my life, that was one of the ones that really helped me understand where I was coming from, you know, being a Latin in this country, and what that album said to me that way, right? Being New Rican, combination with all these other, you know, cultures coming together in this country. And but I was so I'm a visual artist, and as you can see.
Okay.
So, and Ami has been, I've been very blessed to be able to work with Ami in the last few years on some art projects there at the center.
Great artist.
And so I work a lot with record labels and doing art for different people. And so I was just wondering, if, in terms of art and just music in general, what you see as the future of taking, you know, your dad's work and uncle's work and family there, Willie, you know, Willie's work, but also just Latin music in general. Like, what do you see as the future of it, given this new COVID reality, but also just the changes of sound recordings and where we're going as a world with technology?
For me, I think it's going to be a combination of the technology and also bringing it back to being raw. Because as you see, we're here, we're all in our homes and everything like that, nothing too fancy. We have, you know, the virtual background thing. It's great and everything. But we're raw. So I think that the music now should come from a place of that, you know, we don't have to, we can go back to simplicity. And, you know, I think that this whole COVID thing has been like a reset. It's a reset for, like, you know, we need to really, you know, think or rethink what the important things are in our lives and what are our goals, what we want, what we enjoy, what we like to do, you know, and everything. Not putting off things to the last minute, you know, doing what you need to do to be happy, you know, to really think about these things, not to be trivial and not to take things for granted. We're all stuck here in our homes, and we have to do, what do we do for entertainment? You know, you're seeing music come alive now. You know, you're seeing a lot of DJs, a lot of people playing on the IG Live now. A lot of people are just trying to, you know, bring joy into the world, because again, music is a universal language. Music is what's saving a lot of this. You know, to be able to, you know, new music, a live stream, somebody playing and things like that. Music is what's putting this all together. So in a way, you know, let's get back to the simplicity of things and then build off of that using technology. Not let technology make it like we don't want to associate with people anymore. Now, you know, we have to associate with people like this. You know, we have to, you know, we're not that close, but we have to create some sort of closeness. We have to do it now. So we just have to think about things in a, you know, in a different way, you know. And I think that there's going to be some good music that's going to come out of this. I think there's going to be some really people that are going to be able to think about things, good literature, good books, good things are going to come out of this, you know. People using their creativity to make things, make clothes, make things like that. We got to start to bring back the creativity, bring back that raw thing, you know. So maybe
and
that's
lots of good homeschooling, Eric. Lots of good homeschooling.
There it is. So
yeah.
You know, we got it. We got it. There's books. There's things. You know, it's, you know, there's life.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool deal. Thank you, everybody. Mario, Rob, Josh, Amin, everyone. It's been great. This has been wonderful. Let's Zoom again sometime.
Yes, absolutely. I definitely, you know, I want to thank Monica Bailey really quick. She's our education coordinator, and it was Monica's idea to do Willie Bobo this year. So thank you so much, Monica, for this. It's been an amazing experience. Thank you all. We're recording, so we will upload it soon, and you'll be able to watch it. So, gentlemen, you were amazing.
So great.
We did it. We did it. Thank you.
Looking for the book. I'm looking for the book. All right. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
This is awesome. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.